Coming to you from the Deep South, this is the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. High-impact leadership is not reserved for leaders, and it has nothing to do with your position, title, or rank. However, it does have everything to do with your character. It's time to climb to the next level and beyond, personally and professionally. Now, let's start making it happen with your host, Mack Story.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. Today, we're on part 6 of 30, focused on this 30-part series on my book, Blue Collar Leadership and Culture, the 5 components for building high-performance teams. So you got to know high-performance cultures support high-performance teams. Real quick recap, because see, today I'm going to introduce you to the 5 components. I've been reading the subtitle of this book at the opening of every episode, the 5 components for building high-performance teams. I'm about to introduce you to those. These first 5 chapters that I shared earlier on previous episodes, those 5 chapters were about helping you see why you should continue reading, why you should dive in deeper. So real quick recap. Chapter 1, the cost of culture. The 3 dilemmas I talked about, engagement, retention, and turnover. Chapter 2 is the foundation of culture, where I talked about the organizational culture will be determined by the top leaders' values. Chapter 3 was the impact of culture. Those who work there will determine who wants to work there. Chapter 4 was becoming a sought-after employer, which meant people who don't work there want to work there. And then Chapter 5 last week was becoming an employer of choice, which meant people who work there want to keep working there. So again, you can read those first 5 chapters if you haven't already got the book. I strongly encourage you to get the book. And if you're a leader and have leaders reporting to you, get them the book. Maybe do a book study with them as you're going through this, and maybe have them listen to this podcast. All you have to do to do a book study, nobody has to teach. You just sit around, read the chapter together, take turns reading a paragraph. It'll take you 6 or 7 minutes. Sit there with your leaders. It's going to seem maybe silly the first time you do it. 2 or 3 sessions into it, people will be engaged. Again, go back and listen to episode 170 with high impact CEO of GAT Airline Ground Support, Mike Huff. He talks about doing that exact thing with his team and how the first couple of times maybe they were not very interested, but then they became very interested, and then they bought 600 copies for everyone else. But all you have to do, take turns reading a paragraph of a chapter. While you're reading, everyone underlines or highlights key points. 6 or 7 minutes, you're done reading the chapter together, and then everyone talks about their key point, and most importantly, why was it a key point? That's all you have to do a simple, high-impact book study. No one has to prepare. No one has to do homework. No one's judged. You just do it. Then you get up and you leave. That simple. That's how you take people through this content. Any of my books you can do like that. All right. Today we're on part 6, chapter 6. I told you last time and earlier I'm about to teach you and introduce you to the transformation equation. The transformation equation is made up of the 5 components for building high-performance teams. Before I share those with you, again, if you're listening today and you're somewhere you can get on a computer, if you didn't do it already, go to bluecollarleadership.com/download. You'll see one option that you can select there is Blue Collar Leadership White Paper. Open that up, look at it on the screen, or either you can download it, print it, whatever you want to do. But you'll see within that white paper, within the second or third page, you'll see the transformation equation. So you'll have a visual of what I'm talking about. And again, you also, at that address, bluecollarleadership.com/download, you actually can download the first 5 chapters of this book. Every word from the first 5 chapters, go ahead and read it and get an idea. All right. So as we dive into the transformation equation, chapter 6, where I introduce this, and again, the entire rest of the book is based on these 5 components. And there's different amounts of chapters dedicated to each component, with a heavy emphasis on the first component. But before I share them components, I want to read you a quote by my friend Amir Ganad. Amir's got an amazing story. He come from Iran at the age of 16 by himself, couldn't speak English. And today, he's out there killing it. He's got a great book called The Transformative Leader, but he recently retired a year or two ago from Campbell's Soup. Everybody's probably familiar with Campbell's Soup, but Amir had worked his way up from arriving here at 16, couldn't speak English. When he retired a few years back, he was the global leadership development guru, basically, for Campbell's Soup. He was responsible for growing and developing the talent within the entire organization at all levels, in all locations, and all that sort of stuff. And he's got a great book, again, called The Transformative Leader. Pretty sure that's where I captured this quote from Amir, so I always like to give a shout out to him. He and his wife Connie and children Naveed and Nassim have become friends of ours over the past few years, and actually became friends with Amir because he saw something I had shared about my first book in the Blue Collar Leadership series, Leading from the Front Lines, and I sent him a copy and he read it, and he sent me a copy of his book and I read it, and we figured out that we were aligned with character and purpose, and became really good friends. And I was able to help Amir to get to speak at Yale University when Rhea and I spoke. So it was pretty cool. Amir actually opened and spoke, and then Rhea and I spoke after him. So that was a great time for all of us to go do that together. But here's a quote from Amir. Amir says, this is a long one. I'll tell you when I'm done with Amir's words. Amir says, change starts with what is and attempts to keep what is working intact and eliminate what is not. Transformation simply starts with nothing and is led by a vision of the whole as if it were to be created from scratch today. The former views today as an extension of yesterday and tries to make the most of what is. The latter sees today as the beginning of tomorrow and shapes today's circumstances as a solid foundation for what will be. That ends the quote from Amir. Pretty powerful. But he's talking about change starts with what is and tries to just keep it working and eliminates what's not working. Kind of like continuous improvement, so to speak. But he's saying that transformation starts with nothing, basically. It's led by a vision of the whole as if it were to be created from scratch. And that's why I say this book is about cultural transformation. It's not about tweaking what's working and what's not. This book is a roadmap. My book is a roadmap and guide, Blue Collar Leadership and Culture, of how to basically start with nothing. And it's easy for a lot of people because they don't have anything. They've never done anything like this. So that's exactly who I wrote this book for. Somebody who wants to start from wherever they're at, clean slate. How do we build a high performance culture that will support a high performance team? So I'm about to teach you the transformation equation. And again, it'd be a lot easier if you could see it. If you can't see it, I'm going to try to paint you a picture. It's pretty simple and straightforward, but it's a lot better if you got the visual. And again, it's actually at the back of chapter 6. If you're in the book, it's on page 20. If not, get the Blue Collar Leadership white paper and you can see it. All right. So across the top, it's basically like a math equation, but instead of numbers, there's components. And there's 5 components, and they equal transformation. So if you're writing, if you don't have access, but you want to write it down, or you're just trying to visually see it, I'm going to just kind of paint a picture right here. Starting from left to right, it goes like this. Leadership development plus buy-in plus unifying purpose plus competency plus execution equals transformation. And again, this transformation equation is being used as the basis for this entire book. Rhea and I come up with this equation a while back, and we were actually, first time we spoke on it, we spoke to a group of prison wardens we've done it several times now, and we introduced this equation, and they just loved it. They said it was self-explanatory. And I'm about to walk you through the rest of the equation. The rest of it assumes when one of those components is missing, you don't get transformation, you get something else. So I'm about to walk you through that and talk you through it, explain it to you. But when the prison wardens from across the nation saw this, they were like, this is self-explanatory. It makes so much sense. And that's when Rio and I realized we were onto something with this transformation equation. And shortly after that's when I wrote this book. I was like, this is some good stuff, so I'm going to turn it into a book. And it became this Blue Collar Leadership and Culture book. So let's talk about the components a little bit before I break down the rest of the equation and start removing components. Leadership development is the first one. It's on the left for a reason, because it's the foundation for buy-in. It's the foundation for unifying purpose. It's the foundation for competency, for execution. Leadership development is the foundation. What you don't see if you're looking at the equation, but I talk about it in the book later chapters, and I break it down. Leadership development is really, there's two sub-components within that component. There's leadership development of self and leadership development of others. So as a leader or a person, I've got to grow and develop myself with the intent of growing and developing others, and then I have to do it. Buy-in comes between leadership development and unifying purpose. So the equation starts with leadership development plus buy-in plus unifying purpose plus competency plus execution equals transformation. So I'm talking about the first three components. Buy-in is in the middle of the first three. It's the second one. It's between 1 and 3 because people buy into the leadership development, before they buy into the vision, which is related to unifying purpose. So before I'm going to buy into the unifying purpose, I'm going to buy into the leader. Relative to transformation of culture, I could buy into the purpose and not buy into the leader. If that happens, I'm going to go find me a new leader with the same purpose. But here I'm tying it all together. So leadership development supports buy-in, which supports the cultural development of people buying into me as the leader and my purpose. So that's why buy-in comes second. And then when you move beyond unifying purpose and you get to the competency component, competency absolutely means all the competency you have to know to do the job. But relative to cultural transformation, I'm not talking about the skills to do the job. You already understand all of that. Relative to this book, when I'm talking about competency, relative to the transformation equation, I'm talking about leadership ability. I'm talking about competency of knowing, understanding, and applying personal growth and leadership development principles. How do you lead yourself well? How do you lead others well? Relative to this book, that's what I mean here by competency. And then execution comes last in this equation, because if you don't do the first 4 things, you're never going to have execution. So let's walk through these. If you've got the equation written out, and if you're looking at the visual, and you already know what I'm about to talk about. But if not, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down this equation again, but each time I'm going to take out one piece and leave all the other pieces. So what you get, when we go down to the first level, we take out the first component, leadership development. Leave that blank. You don't have leadership development. Maybe you got buy-in, unifying purpose, competency, and execution. Without leadership development, if that component is missing, you're going to have frustration. And remember, leadership, as I define it, Rhea and I learned it from John Maxwell, and he probably learned it from somebody else, but we define leadership as influence. So imagine you as a leader, you as a team member. It doesn't matter, 360 degrees from wherever you're standing. If you don't have influence, again, leadership development grows and develops your influence with other people. So if you don't have leadership development, you can't influence people effectively when you want to, you're going to be frustrated. So when leadership development is missing from the equation, there's going to be frustration. Every time you've ever been mad, sad, upset, frustrated, I promise it wasn't because you had too much influence. It was because you didn't have enough. If you can't influence the boss, you're going to be frustrated. If the boss can't influence you, the boss is going to be frustrated. If you can't influence your peers, the people at your level, you're going to be frustrated. If they can't influence you, they're going to be frustrated. Any kind of direction you go. If you're at home, you can't influence your children or your spouse, you're going to be frustrated. How do you overcome all that? You grow and develop yourself and learn how to build trust and all these components of leadership development, personal growth. You either do it and eliminate frustration, or you don't, and you get to enjoy frustration. You decide. Now let's look at another level. Go another level down. Leadership development is back in the equation. This time, we're going to take out buy-in. All components are there, except there's no buy-in. We have leadership development. We have a unifying purpose. We have competency to do the job. We know how to execute, but there's no buy-in. There's no buy-in. This is all common sense stuff. With no influence, there's frustration. Now I'm telling you, with no buy-in, there's resistance. That's exactly what it means when you have buy-in. You eliminate resistance. So when we don't have buy-in, again, buy-in is based on influence, which is leadership development. But I'm saying we have leadership development in the equation, but there's still no buy-in. That means we need more leadership development. But when buy-in is missing, there's going to be resistance. So if I'm the leader of the organization or I'm the leader of my team, there's no buy-in. Guess whose responsibility it is to generate buy-in? It's mine. I can't be blaming them because they're not bought into me. I'm the leader. I'm responsible. Now let's go down another level. Everything's back in the equation, except this time I'm taking out unifying purpose. So we have leadership development. We have buy-in. We have competency to do the job. We can execute, but we don't have a unifying purpose. We don't have a vision, a mission. We don't necessarily know why we're doing what we do. Without unifying purpose, there's going to be confusion. There's no transformation. There's confusion. It's a leader's job to create the unifying purpose and then to communicate the unifying purpose. Cast the vision. Share the mission. Without it, there's going to be confusion. Everybody, I'll get to that in a minute, but I want to say relative to culture, but I want to talk about each one of them relative to culture. But right here, without a unifying purpose, if you haven't taken your leadership team through this entire book, you got to figure out some other way to communicate the unifying purpose. If you use this book as a tool and a resource, as I've intended it, to help cast the vision to your leaders, and if you truly want to be a high impact leader, it's everybody at every level. If I was running an organization, I would teach every single employee, top to bottom, they would go through this book and do a book study, because I would want to make sure everyone knew the purpose. This book is the unifying purpose for cultural transformation. If you don't do this, you got to do it some other way. I don't know how you're going to figure out to do it any easier if you've read the book than to use the book. You're going to have to reinvent and rewrite your own book. What you could do is use my book and then supplement it with anything you have specific to your organization or you or the people. But the key is there would be no confusion about why are we doing cultural transformation and what's it going to look like. Everybody would have that covered with this book. So again, I said that early on in the first part of the series, chapter 1. The purpose of this, to teach the leader and to get everyone on board, and also as a tool for others to help the leaders get on board if they're not on board. 3 different ways you can use it. Let's go down another level. Every component's back in the picture except competency. We got leadership development. We got buy-in. We got unifying purpose. We got the ability to execute, but we don't have competency. So when competency is missing from the equation, there's anxiety. It doesn't equal transformation anymore. It equals anxiety. And competency, again, could be related to doing the job. You understand that already. If you don't know how to do the job, you're going to have anxiety. If you know how to do the job today and tomorrow you start using a new software system to do the same job you've been 100% effective at up until tomorrow, there's an entirely new system you have to learn. Instantly, you don't have the competency. Instantly, there's anxiety. Relative to culture, this competency is related to leading people. You start teaching, again, this is another reason, use the book. Take people through it slow. Go slow to go fast. Don't just start teaching leadership development to the supervisors. Teach everybody what's coming and why. It's part of this competency equation. It's not only the unifying purpose, but it's to help them start slowly developing the competency. Because if you start teaching leadership development in an organization that only in the past people have been expected to manage people and not lead people, and the way you would know that is there's been no leadership development whatsoever, which means most people, if not all people, are managing people like things and objects, not like people. So when you start asking a manager of people, or you start telling them or requiring them to become a leader of people, they don't even know what you're talking about because they think that's what I've been doing my whole life. But they don't know they ain't even been close. They're going to have a lot of anxiety. You're going to start wanting them to develop their soft skills, which most managers of people ain't really excited about soft skills, but there ain't nothing soft about it. It's hard because it's character development. So when you start talking about leading people, you bring somebody like me and start talking about this, you got to understand they're going to get anxious. And if you're growing and learning far ahead of them, you're reading my book, but you're not sharing it with them, they don't understand the big picture. If they read it, they understand exactly what I'm talking to you right now because I talk about it in the book. So everybody gets to understand, beginning with the end in mind. Why are we doing it? What's it going to look like? How do we get there? And everybody gets to be involved in it. Now let's look at the last component. All the components are there. We've got leadership development, buy-in, unifying purpose, competency. But now execution is missing. When execution is missing, there's stagnation. There's no longer transformation. Without execution, there's stagnation. That's pretty self-explanatory. If we can't execute, best cases, we maintain status quo. Worst case, we start going backward and we start losing to the competition. Or relative to cultural transformation, we start going back where we came from. If we're not executing on developing people and developing ourselves, we're not transforming the culture. It's being allowed to just naturally go back to whatever state it was before we started. So now across the bottom of the transformation equation, I show what happens when all 5 components are missing. We don't have leadership development. We don't have buy-in. We don't have unifying purpose. We don't have competence. We don't have execution. I worked in a lot of those kind of organizations. And sometimes I still support those kind of organizations because when they start down this path, some of them have none of these components in place. What does that equal? Chaos. If you don't have any of these 5 components, I promise you, you've got chaos. So this transformation equation. The rest of this entire book, it's all about these components. I break down the rest of the book. Each component I break down into sub-components. Teach you what does that mean. Again, relative to culture. These are principles. This chart, this equation, based on principles. You could take it and apply it to anything. But I'm applying it to culture within this book. That's why if I go back and I talk about when leadership development is missing, there's frustration. I mean, you can't have culture development without leadership development. Complete frustration because you have management of people, not leadership of people. You got high turnover. Remember the cost of culture. You got low engagement. You've got disengagement. You've got retention issues. Can't retain top talent. You got turnover issues. We're bringing in people with poor character, and then we're having to terminate them because of their character. And maybe because of our character, we're not even bringing in good people with good competence. All kind of things. But relative to culture, we talk about buy-in. Again, relative to culture, without buy-in of culture transformation, meaning I've got to be willing to grow and develop myself and change my values. If I don't buy into that, I'm resistant. And I'm going to tell you, the top 3 problems you're going to have with cultural transformation is top leadership, middle leadership, and frontline leadership. It's not going to be the people on the front line. They're begging and hoping and wishing and waiting for a top leader to lead this transformation. If the top leader never does, it's never going to happen. If the top leader does choose to do it, they're going to find out what I just told you. Their greatest obstacle then is going to be middle management and first line supervision. These people who are used to leading from a position of authority, title, rank, manipulation, intimidation. Those people are very resistant. They're not going to buy in real easily. Some will, most won't. It really depends on the leader. Because see, if the leader was not bought into this kind of leadership development in the past, but had some kind of awakening, and they came to a higher level of awareness, maybe they never heard of this stuff, whatever happened, they decided, I want to get better. This is who I want to be. This is who I want to become. If they were right the opposite in the past, they've built a team that's right the opposite. And now their team may not want to change just because the top leader decided to change. The top leader's got to go down this hard path and see who will be on board. And then whoever's not on board after enough time, they got to be left behind. And a lot of them will fire the leader and go find themselves another leader because they don't want to play anymore. Sometimes a leader has to get rid of the team member, one that they might have loved last year, but they may have grown so much now that they say this isn't the right kind of person, and they don't want to change. Now I can't allow them to contaminate my team. It's a big deal. So I hope you got the transformation equation. Hope you was able to see it visually in the book or on the Blue Collar Leadership white paper. And again, if you're a top level leader, you're buying into this stuff, the sooner you can get the formal authority leaders who report to you to get on this same page with you, even if you're just learning, if you don't even know if you're interested in transforming the culture, I highly encourage you, go ahead and get your leaders engaged so they can be learning with you. And some of them may get you on board more than you get them on board, or vice versa. And you'll also start to see who's not even interested, who's not even on board. Then you'll know where your challenges is going to be. A lot of ways to use this book, this podcast series. Again, I got my playlist with 30 3-minute videos. So that's 90 minutes of me talking, 3 minutes per chapter on each chapter of this book on my YouTube channel. youtube.com/C/Mack Story, and then look up the playlist for Blue Collar Leadership and Culture. Hope you enjoyed this talk on the transformation equation. If you ain't got the book, you need to dive in because I'm leaving a lot of stuff out. And again, it don't take but 6 or 7 minutes to read a chapter. And although I'm talking to you for 20 minutes or more, still we're missing a lot. Talk to you next time.
Make it happen or someone else will. It might as well be you. Are you serious about taking your career and your life to the next level and beyond? Check out Mack Story's Blue Collar Leadership series books and others, now available on audio, along with paperback and ebooks at Amazon, iTunes, and Audible. Please visit bluecollarleadership.com to learn about Mack's books, programs, special offers, certifications, and more. Thank you for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast.